Tonight on Newshour, we turn our attention to East Africa, where two long-time rivals, Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of the Congo, appear to be moving toward economic cooperation in a move welcomed by the United States. Well, the U.S. Department of State has announced that both countries have agreed to a new regional economic integration framework. This follows the signing of a peace agreement in June aimed at ending violent confrontations, many of them linked to control over natural resources in the mineral-rich border region. The new framework reportedly includes initiatives on infrastructure, public health, energy, and mineral supply chains. Crucially, it includes commitments from both sides to prevent armed groups from profiting from these resources. Kigali and Kinshasa also affirmed sovereign control over their own assets and will seek input from civil society and the private sector as the plan is implemented over the next 90 days. Meanwhile, a regional security mechanism is expected to convene in Addis Ababa on August the 7th to review the withdrawal of Rwandan troops from Congolese territory, another sensitive point in last year's ceasefire terms. Well, the agreement signed in the US capital comes 2 months after the two neighbours committed to ending the long-running conflict in eastern Congo. Chris Okamringa has more now from Kinshasa.
The economic partnership signed in Washington, D.C. between Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo has received mixed reactions in the capital, Kinshasa. Supporters of President Felix Tshisekedi have described it as an important step towards ending illegal mining, which may ultimately help restore peace in eastern DRC. But opposition figures have criticized the deal, saying it's rewarding Rwanda for acts of aggression committed in Congolese territory. Relations between the two countries got strained in late 2021 after the M23 rebels launched their armed activities. The DRC government accuses Rwanda of backing the rebels to plunder their mineral resources. But Kigali has repeatedly denied the charge and accused Kinshasa of supporting a militia of ethnic Hutus who are seeking to topple the government of President Paul Kagame. Under the economic deal, the two countries will carry out joint projects in the mining, tourism, infrastructure, and public health sectors. The projects are expected to be launched within 90 days. Chris Ochamringa for A News in Kinshasa.
Now to Kigali, where Rwanda is positioning the framework as an opportunity for regional development and greater cooperation with its neighbour. Joining us from the capital is Silvanus Karamira, senior editor and international broadcaster. He's been following the diplomatic response and public sentiment in Rwanda very closely indeed. It's great to have you on the show, Silvanus. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Let's get into this then. How is the Rwandan government presenting this framework at home, especially given those long-standing tensions with Kinshasa?
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Actually, Rwandan government touts this framework on three key areas or principles for this matter. One is about sovereignty of Rwanda, because for a long time Rwanda has been complaining about the presence of the FDLR, a Hutu militia, which has been operating in the eastern part of the DRC for the last 30 years after the genocide committed against the Tutsi here. But Kinshasa government on the other side has maintained that the FDLR is no longer a threat to Rwanda. It is composed of aging people. So this contentious issue has always been there as one of the root causes of the problem. But now the Rwandan government on this framework thinks it's now a legitimate complaint because now this grievance has been embedded in the framework, which is one of the key areas that should be considered before any forward step. Number two, Rwanda thinks that it's important to have this framework because it now opens for the diplomatic avenue between the two countries, because as you remember, the diplomatic relations between DRC and Rwanda has been soured for quite some time. But now that the framework is there, it has now been opening the doors for the two countries to mutually discuss and reach a compromise on how best they can go to solving this problem. Number three is about economic progress between the two countries, because the DRC has categorically and consistently been blaming Rwanda, accusing Rwanda of stealing their minerals in the eastern part of the DRC. But the framework provides a very open avenue where the minerals will be transported from the eastern part of the DRC to Rwanda's mineral refineries for the processing before they're being exported to the foreign countries. So Rwanda looks at this as a win-win situation, unlike before, because the two countries are going to be benefiting through this. So in a nutshell, I would say that Kigali touts this framework as one that is legitimate, sovereign, and win-win between the two countries.
And just explain to us, if you can, specifically the M23 accusations, how internally that is being messaged with the internal population, and also, is Kigali trying to kind of draw a line between diplomacy and then security realities?
That's it. As I said, to some point, the DRC government, through its president, Felix Tshisekedi, has maintained categorically that Rwanda is supporting the M23, and Rwanda on the other side, despite some of the reports implicating Rwanda, but Rwanda has steadily and drastically been denying this involvement. And on the other side, the DRC has always been maintaining that it won't have discussion between the DRC government and the M23 because the DRC looks at M23 as a force that is proxy to Rwanda. So to some point now, Rwanda thinks now that these two frameworks, and here I mean the Washington framework and the Qatar framework, is now to some point gives Rwanda's legitimate, to some point, concern that now the DRC government has finally agreed to talk, to have one-on-one with the M23, and to some point to separate these two problems, because Kinshasa and Rwanda are meeting in Washington. In the same time, the Kinshasa government is also meeting with M23 delegates, in Qatar, in Doha. So Rwanda thinks that it's now high time that the world is to some point now understands the root causes, and like to some point, the DRC has always been accusing Rwanda of supporting the M23. So diplomatically, you see, Rwanda looks at this scenario as a gain or a win-win, just like I said, because now it separates the two problems, which initially has been mixing up with the different players who have tried to some point, solving this problem.
And Silvanos, you mentioned Qatar, Doha there. Just one of many economic relationships that Rwanda has developed in recent years, positioning itself in some senses as a gateway to Eastern Africa. Lots of hard work diplomatically, economically has gone into forging those relationships. Now we see that this framework outlines cooperation in infrastructure, in energy, mineral supply chains too. It's quite comprehensive. How significant do you think these sectors are going to be for Rwanda's continued long-term economic ambitions?
Thank you. I think for the long time, actually, Rwanda's posture has always been economic growth and open for foreign markets, so to say. And this is built on a very solid foundation of peace and security that the country has built over the last 30 years. Now, going by this framework, the two countries are going to be benefiting because, Rwanda is very tiny, but very strategically located, because almost over 80% of the cargo that is coming from Dar es Salaam port to the eastern part of the DRC through two different borders in Rubavu with the Congo's Goma and in Rusizi with the Congo's Bukavu are going through Rwanda. So by having this framework, Rwanda thinks that the two countries are going to be benefiting, number one. But number two, the two countries have had some joint ventures into one mineral deals, just like we said earlier, but also the methane gas that is being extracted from Lake Kivu, which is, to some point has been contributing to, to the national grid here in Rwanda with some megawatts. And also there's another project, what is known as Rusizi 3, hydropower between the two countries. So generally speaking, and looking from this perspective, Rwanda thinks that the deal now comes to enhance this partnership that to some point has been disrupted by the conflict and to some point lawless state, which has been there for quite some time, and the armed groups. Now that the two frameworks are addressing the root causes of the armed groups, including the FDLR and the M23, Rwanda thinks now that it's high time now its long-term strategy to position itself as one of the safest and secure countries in the greatest region is going to be of paramount importance, so to say.
Yeah, it's very interesting, this sense that you speak of there, that this deal will almost free up Rwanda to not just enhance this relationship, but to go on and perhaps rethink, develop, innovate on its existing foreign policy. How do you see that playing out over the next 2 to 5 years?
I think that is very, very, initially we have had some different, players coming into this conflict. But this time is quite different because most of players initially were looking at this issue in terms of economic gains. And that's why perhaps you have been reading around and hearing around that the conflict is actually, rooted into the mineral richness of the DRC. But if you look at this framework, which has been blocked by the U.S., there are three very important components. One is political, economic, and diplomatic, so to say. In this case, Rwanda thinks now that because the DRC has been, as I said earlier, that it has been, accusing Rwanda of stealing their minerals. But now Rwanda looks at this deal as a transparent one, which now thinks that if they, address it very well and implement it very well, of course, it will support the long-term, Rwanda's endeavor to position itself as a hub for development in this region. However, sometimes back, some of the leaders here were very cautious, saying that the DRC government, even if it has been, agreeing that they are going to be uprooting the FDLR, but it's going to be very tricky because the FDLR has been at some point integrated into their armies and so on and so forth. So this skepticism is there, but I think because of the different players, in this case, the DRC, Rwanda, Washington, Qatar, and the AU, this joint operation oversight team that is always, looking at this framework, I think maybe we hope for the best in the coming years, just like you said.
Well, let's just zone in on one of those relationships you mentioned there, Washington. Now, the US State Department has publicly backed this deal, so clearly there is some trust between Rwanda and the United States. Mr. Kagame is a well-known, well-recognized world leader. What is the nature of the relationship, the bilateral relationship between Kigali and between Rwanda and Washington in the US, and how do you expect that relationship to develop over the next few years?
Well, I think going by history, the U.S., Rwanda has been an ally, a very close ally with the U.S., and the U.S. to some point looks at Rwanda as a very staunch and solid, ally, because Rwanda, in this region, to be sincere, Rwanda has positioned itself as one of the safest and very serious countries, so to say, and therefore, because there is no question about what I'm saying, because going by this deal, the framework, the U.S. wants to benefit, from these two different countries, and therefore Rwanda looks at, the U.S. looks at Rwanda as one of the key, potential allies who can help in this, because in the eastern part of the DRC, it might take some time to be secured and to be safe. But in Rwanda, the country is very serious, very secure, is very safe. And therefore, I think we are likely to see a very, enhanced diplomatic growth and the business and economic growth, so to say. So I think I don't see any drastic change from now. What I see is the continuing growing because if you look at the borders with Rwanda and the DRC in Rusizi and in Goma, I think the situation is becoming too much calm, and therefore the two countries are trying to build on that to maybe have some strategic gains in the next few years.
And how does, finally, Sylvanus, how does Kigali see itself? How does Rwanda see itself now in the world? I mean, for many years, Kigali itself has been positioned as a city that has great advantages in terms of security, safety, a positive place to do business. We know that there are key strategic relationships with many countries of great wealth, like Middle Eastern countries, like Gulf countries like Qatar. How does Rwanda look now to position itself to build on that over the next few years, to create a brand for itself on the international stage?
Yeah, thank you. I think Rwanda has repeated through its leaders has repeatedly said that the huge investment or the backbone of development of this country has been the security and safety of both Rwandans and the foreigners who are living in Rwanda. And I believe, you and I, we know that safety and security in these days are the one of the expensive, factors in our lives, in our contemporary lives. So I think Rwanda has invested so much in securing its borders, and it's actually one of the, provisions in the framework that the defensive measures on the border with the DRC should be removed, although Rwanda has made it clear that the defensive measures should be removed after the FDLR has been demoralized. But I think the countries that I've mentioned have even demonstrated the will to work with Rwanda, number one. But number two, to some point, because of the partnership, let's say between the Qatar government and the Rwandan government, the European Union and the U.S., even Chinese, I think if this issue of security threats along the border with Rwanda, and the eastern part of the DRC at large, gets solved to some point, I think we are likely to see the high pace of development and the high volume of foreign investment in Rwanda, because Rwanda has been saying that because Rwanda does not, just like I said, is a very tiny country, and therefore it relies heavily on the good governance, foreign investment, ease of doing business, tourism, and minerals, and so on and so forth. So by having the security and safety in the eastern part of the Congo, which has been the huge market for Rwanda's goods, I think we are likely to see, just like I said, a very conducive environment between the two countries. Because initially and from the onset, the east part of the DRC Congo has been an incubator for the armed groups, which to some point has been jeopardizing Rwanda's security from the western part of Rwanda. So I think if this framework puts an end to these conflicts in the eastern part of the DRC, then even the international investors and the foreign people who are coming to invest in here, maybe they are going to be increasing in numbers to make sure their investments are not jeopardized by the frequent cross-border attacks from the DRC.
Okay, Sylvanus Karemera, thank you very much indeed for joining us from Kigali in Rwanda. Okay, that is all for this edition of News Hour from all of us here at A News. Thanks for being with us.